Okay. Deeper experiences of famous Christians. We get to do more of this. And if you have the large print version, you can read through your chapters faster.
Yes, you
The other one's a little more in depth. Okay. And deeper experiences of famous Christians. We get to do more of this.
Whoa!
And
I've heard that before.
If you have the large print version, you can read through your chapters faster.
Yes.
Okay, let's see. We've got a number of these folks that we are looking at here in this early part of this edition of Deeper Experiences. They're in Europe, and they're happening things are happening in a time that would fit this timeline from 1300 to 1700. And to put that in some kind of perspective, I thought I'd just put that up on the board. Cass was asking questions about all those things. She said, it just needs to have a timeline in here, so you kind of have an idea of where all this fits and what's happening. And so I thought, yeah, that's probably a good idea. So we'll put it up here. The Crusades, 1200s, that's, Europeans are running from Europe, protecting Jerusalem, and there's a whole battle with the Muslims, so that whole thing's going on. And it was profitable for the most part. So, once you do one and you come back with a bunch of money, wow, that was good, let's do more of those. So that kind of caught on, and they kept fighting for a while. And that had a different impact on Europe. Let's go back to 1000. So if you go 1000, you're going into a millennium, and you are a Christian, and Jesus is coming back. What happened with our year 2000, our millennial experience was, if you were in Christian circles, Jesus is coming back because it's 2000, because he's locked into the calendar. And that same thing happened in 1000. So that's all going. And then the pilgrims, right after the year 1000, wanted to go to Jerusalem on these pilgrimages, and then they are getting beat up, harassed, whatever, by the Muslims who were there. And so that led to crusades, and we're going to go save Jerusalem, save the pilgrims, make a path for them to go on pilgrimage. That went on for a while, so it affects the people back in Europe, and they're thinking, okay, to be spiritual, you need to go fight. You have to defend this. You got to defend the church, defend against this Muslim incursion. That's became a mentality and a way of preparing. And again, a bunch of them were making money. So we may be the country about capitalism, but making money has been a thing forever. So that was a big deal. It was a draw. But we move past that one. That's still in the back of their heads. But we get to 1300, and there's the Pope had a bunch of power, so he could say, yeah, you guys go on that. They wouldn't go on a crusade without his blessing, so he has to sign off. So they take off. They do their thing. By 1300, we got popes. We got not one, we got 3. And they're fighting over who's in charge. And you're in charge of Europe. So kings get their nod from the Pope. I mean, it's all tied together. So that's why these things are up here, because it's all over the place. So what's true, what's right, where's the power, and for a while the Pope is not in Rome, he's in France. You go, well, that makes sense. So we've got this, it's just moving around. So that thing's happening. But the middle of the century, we got the Black Plague. It comes through, and it takes out people in Italy and what's now Germany and France and England, and it's just devastating. So you could be in a town that you knew everybody. So here in Pryor, you got 10,000 people, and then in 3 days, you got 5,000. And you go, well, that changes things. You don't have enough people to keep the McDonald's open. You got to really rethink your business, and that's what happened to them. I mean, they're burying people as fast as they can, and it's just a crazy time. It affected the population of Europe is so devastated, and now they've got to, and there was a small, weather-wise, there was climate change. I know it only happens now because we have plastic, but there was this climate change thing, and it was cold. Europe was colder than normal, and it went on all the way across this period of time. So it was harder to raise crops. It was harder to just maintain these towns, cities, all of that. So there's a weather, it's affected by the weather. So that's one thing. We've got some political things, especially involving the Pope and who's really which Pope, and they finally got one. And then you got, once you get that guy, then you're going, and then it had like ultimate power, 1300s. Ultimate power is sitting there in Rome. Then you get to 1450, and printing press comes along. It's invented. Now we can have Bibles. Bibles are getting printed. And so what wasn't available before, you had to have somebody write this thing down. Now you can print a bunch of them. You can get books out to people. It's a whole new world. That was the tech of the day, probably the tech of the millennium. I mean, it changed everything. So that changes. So New World, 1492, we got that opens up. We got, they're looking at expansion and possibilities. Spain goes from, in 1492, the last, in case you didn't know, Spain was under the influence of the power of the Muslims. And then in 1492, the last of them were sent out. So, forced out. So that's a big change. So now Spain, the Christians who are there have won the war. They are now definitely in favor of expanding and getting the Christian message out. And so, and they're under the power of the Pope. The new regime is like this. We're excited about that. It also leads to the Inquisition, which is not so positive. But they were so excited about it, that's part of the thing. And they want to protect themselves so badly that's the corruption that kind of comes with humans doing stuff. Anyway, printing press, 1450, New World, 1492. We're moving into a whole new thing, 1517. Luther, he's a monk, Augustinian monk, and he is trying to deal with some things that are going on in the church. He goes, I'm not sure this is really a good idea, some of the stuff that was happening. So these guys go on crusade. We're back all the way up over here, and they find bones. And this has been going on a while, but they find bones, but get the bones, put them in a reliquary, a box, and then they would take them to the churches. And then these churches would have, people would come to the churches, depending on who you have. And the higher up the scale you get, if you got Peter, Paul, you get something from the cross, a drop of blood from Jesus. Dude, that's power. Seriously, this is powerful. Because remember, they don't have printed Bibles. Nobody has this. They don't have access to that kind of knowledge. They hear stories. They hear. They go with whatever's in their head. And you have a printed Bible. Do you ever go with what's in your head? Probably. Even with access to real knowledge. They didn't have that. So they're going, yeah, man, we got to make a trip all the way to Spain or to Italy or to wherever this church is that has that thing. You don't get to see it for free. There's a box, and you drop your coins in that box. And so that, that's a huge thing. Luther's running around back there going, you think this box of bones really is, for one thing, really that guy with the little label on it? And why are we charging everybody for this thing? It's almost like a circus or something. I don't know. But anyway, that was a big deal. And then they're wanting to build in Rome to work on St. Peter's. And so the Pope has a big idea about that. You got to raise some money, serious money. I mean, it's fancy. So took some cash. And to do that, they ran around the country raising money by saying, if you throw in some money here, we'll get grandma out of purgatory and she can go on to heaven. And Luther's going, I don't see that in the book. That's just not a thing. So, but the way that they challenged that stuff was, let's discuss it. So you put your notice of the things you want to talk about, make a list, and you nail it to the church door. And then you're supposed to have a discussion. So that's what he did. That's the big deal in 1517, that he nails 95 Theses to the door to talk about it. Well, people didn't want to talk about it. So that blew up. So that's the Reformation. But that started the process. So 1517, that starts Luther, Zwingli, we got Calvin. There's a bunch of them. And things start going. So that's here. New world's been found. This happens. By the time you get to Pilgrims in 1620, we're 100 years into this. So they're coming, and England had a different Reformation. Henry VIII just wanted a divorce, and the Pope wasn't going to sign off, so he just goes, well, no more Pope. I'll be the Pope in my country. So, and the king still is, by the way. Charles is the guy. You got to think about that. Charles is that guy. All right. We got Reformation. We got and these guys got kicked out of the Catholic Church. So there was only one church. So now you're kicked out of that church. And so now that it's splintered, there's a whole bunch of different things happening. The answer to that was the Counter-Reformation, which is the Catholic coming back going, no, wait a minute. And so they came back. What was positive about this, some of these guys actually looked at what these guys were saying and went, yeah, I'm not sure that box of bones really is. Anyways, it actually helped. But this happens. And then the Inquisition, Spain, getting serious about, if you don't agree with us, we'll hurt you bad. So that's going on there. So we're 1600s. France, in order to have the political power, which means also money, when you think of France in 1600s, the reason I'm saying that's because that's our time frame. The king of France was France. When you talk about America, we the people. When you talk in 1600s France, you're talking me the king. Everybody else is there to support the king. It's true for all of them. But the royal family is to be supported by all the agriculture, all the business, all of it is there for him, for whatever he desires, whatever. That's why you can come get your daughter. That's why you can come get your sons for the army. It's all supports the king, which may help you understand why in 1776 some people said, let's not do it that way anymore, because this thing is questionable. Yeah, at least. 1600s. So the king is still tied to the power, the Pope's power, and they don't want to lose that power. Louis is like, it's not that he's super religious, he just doesn't want to lose the power position in Europe. So we're picking this story up with these guys who are like, okay, that's the church we've belonged to. That's the thing we've heard about. in France, the Huguenots were the reform group. There were Calvinists there as well. Most of them went to Switzerland by this time, but the Huguenots are there, and they're being persecuted. So lots of them are just being killed. And anybody who kind of agrees with them, because they're not agreeing with the power structure, then we got to get rid of you. Which gets us to Madame Guyon, who is spiritually moving in a direction that says, there's more to this than just the political, religious, going through the motions, going to pilgrimages and paying to see bones or get grandma out of purgatory. I mean, there's more to this. There's like God is really there. You can really get to know him. And that transformation begins to happen in her life. And then as she begins to express that, then problems occur as you came across, as you read through that. It just blows up. The Sun King, who is so positive if you watch the Musketeer movies, or, just here's this guy and he's trying to do good for France and then, but he's the guy who said, yeah, I'll throw you in jail. That's, Louis XIV. Okay, there's the timeline. I told them you told me that timeline would be helpful, so there's a little bit of a timeline.
Well, I hope it helped you all. It helps me.
So you read through this. What kind of is Madame Guyon's life? Did you come across something that like grabbed you?
Well, her life correlates so closely to Job, but she wasn't at the end wasn't restored like what Job was, wound up in the various prisons and even Bastille and Germany. It would have been nice to see her
a different end to the story.
Yeah, but anyway.
Yeah.
But you know that it took her getting to rock bottom to realize that salvation was not thing.
Yeah. She fell in love with the Lord. She definitely pursued him like crazy.
The thing that stood out to me was that she loved the Lord and she got deeper and deeper, but she still had these other life going on. She had the family, she had kids, she had all these things. So often they're depicted as this person is so saintly, he's up on this mountain up here and he hasn't talked to anybody for 20 years. And he didn't bring food to him. Well, that's not the case.
No, she was in the middle of it. And she's royal.
Right.
So she's got to deal with
She had it all.
Yeah. And sometimes you go, well, it's the poor people who become saintly. And then in this case, here's somebody who's in that other ranking. And she's like, no, I want to know more about the Lord. And we're told that she gets a hold of a Bible. When she goes to that convent, and then she reads and realizes, oh, there's more to this. You go, well, that was timely. So 100 years before the printing press is out, Bible's being printed, at least you got access. And that makes for some cool stuff. The population is regaining. It's still cold until almost 1700s that weather pattern was set. It's called the Little Ice Age, so it's a cold period. So that made it hard to like grow stuff, plagues,
And they didn't have vaccines back then.
No vaccines, yeah, and no idea where these things are coming from anyway. The ship pulls up and the rats get off, and there you go. And this is horrible. Yeah, so she is definitely moving in a direction that they hadn't gone before. Let's put that up there. I'll do it this way. her big thing was talking about the self-life and saying, let's not support that. So all that you know about France, you go back to Louis XIV, you've seen those movies or read the books, and so there's wealth. They are immoral. In the royal family, it's just accepted. That's just what you do. And again, everybody's there to support the king. So, you got to build big things like Versailles, big palaces, big fancy stuff, and the money comes to the royals. And she's one of them. And then she goes, it's not about the self-life. It's about falling in love with God. It's about connecting with him. And you read the part about her getting the smallpox, but that was a big deal. She was so impressively beautiful in character and her ability to just relate to people and physically. And she gets married off early and all that. You read that part. But she was so disturbed that she was that beautiful, because she couldn't have a serious conversation with people about spiritual things because it all went to her physical appearance. And the very thing everybody in our country is looking for, because all the commercials on TV and the cosmetics and the stuff you got so you can just beautify yourself, and she's going, I don't want it. I don't want any part of it. And her greatest desire was to somehow distance herself from that, and then smallpox came. And the way this is written, it sounds like she was really more worldly, and the larger biography wouldn't have it that way. She was very disturbed by this. She wanted the spiritual side. She wanted the relationship with God. She wanted to be having real relationships with the people around her that didn't get sidelined by that. She's royal. That puts you in a category all by itself. She's beautiful. That's a whole nother thing. And then she's going, but I want to talk about this. So the smallpox comes and disfigures her, and she is thanking God that she is no longer beautiful. How many people, how many Christian women in America would be jumping up and down to be disfigured in any way at all? And this woman's going, nope, I want to be able to talk about him. I want to get, because the self-life, think about the French at that time. Royals. It's all about the money. It's all about the position and power. You got to be able to work this thing out across Europe, which means you got to be friendly with the Pope, or your power gets sucked out from under you, and you are the one who consumes. The poor people get their change of clothes once a year and new and draw for their mattress. You consume, and they provide. So it's what she's used to is the self-life. Everybody she talks to in her circles would have been consumed with this. So it's interesting that becomes huge as a way of saying, I'm going to walk with God, and that has to go. The consuming side of that has to go. And it's a big deal.
I'm glad they included 7 years of desolation,
Mm-hmm.
just struggling with what had happened. But at the end of it, the way she describes it, it made me think of Pilgrim's Progress. If she said it this way, or maybe just the writer did, said they were like the dark tunnels through mountains of difficulty into valleys of blessing beyond. And wow, she could come to that because she
Went through.
She lost so much. Yeah.
Lost. Yeah, it was one after another after another.
Well, first being married to this older guy at 16, to me that would be a desolation right there. Like, oh, but it was the times, so.
Yeah.
Then she, just,
And her dad made the deal, so you know that there was power and money somehow involved in that. Thank you, Dad.
and a wicked mother-in-law.
Oh, yeah, that was hard.
Some things in the garden she could have made tea with that would have.
Take care of it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough. But she was so excited about the Lord and wanted others to experience that, to know that. I mean, she's going, you pick this up, she gets rolling on this thing, and she is talking to the priests, to the bishops, I mean, to regular folk, but she's not like, I'll go talk to those guys, because if I can talk to those guys, maybe they'll get in that little, the pulpits are up in this high position in the church. Maybe those guys would talk to the people and tell them it's not all about the bones in the box. Let's talk about let's talk about how we can get close to God and turn that thing around. And a number of them were listening, and they found her fascinating, and she really did have an influence in that time. So Fenelon becomes her buddy in this. She meets him, and they have a whole lot of letter writing back and forth. And she's talking about this. So here's a guy who is fast tracking within the church, and he is moving up. The king's heard of him. I mean, he's getting positions that are like just great. I mean, this is the guy who's going to be in charge pretty soon, probably, of everything happening in France as far as the church is concerned. And then he hangs out with her, and it goes south pretty darn quick. And he's going, no, you're right, this is it. And he just buys in. He wants to have that close relationship with God too. So there's a whole shift that is happening between them, and they're having such influence in France that it's threatening to the king. So that's when she gets thrown in prison and prisons, and she got to move around a lot. And then Fenelon, Pope, king talks to Pope, we don't like this guy. He's not going along with our plan, so we'll give him this thing off in the boonies, and he can just stay there. We won't kill him, we won't send him into exile, but basically he was exiled to that little place to try to keep him quiet. But he kept writing stuff, and they kept writing stuff back and forth, and there's a lot of his writings out that you can still read, and it's really cool, the stuff that came out of that. So, Madame Guyon and Fenelon, so you read through some of that. So is there some part of that stands out and you go, yeah, that's kind of cool?
It was pretty impressive that he preached his first sermon at age 15.
Yeah.
Not many can do that.
Yeah. Most don't want to.
Yeah.
Also interesting that when she was in that one place that has a Bible left in her room, and she started reading her Bible more than anything else that she had there to
Yeah.
read.
Yeah. It's so cool. Yeah, the timing was right. Again, the other side, the Bibles are now printed, so you got access to them, and it's left in the room. You go, that was timely. And it's like God in his providence has lined all of these different things up for her. And then she has such an incredible impact on the people around her as she just, the closer she gets to God, the more she's living this thing out, impacting the people around her, except her mother-in-law, really. She just wanted to be in charge.
I found when she said she found that the life of faith is much higher, holier, and happier than the life governed by feelings and emotions. So she clearly, everything that happened to her, especially with her mother-in-law and whatnot, her feelings, the emotions that were coming out from all that meant nothing. She was able to cope with all of that strictly by faith.
Yeah.
And so much of our religious beliefs today are surrounded by faith. You try and put the emotions aside and concentrate on your faith, which she did.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's hard to do. And to put the emotions, well, and where they're not in charge. Yeah. Because they tend to want to take over. You know, they have a rightful place, just not in charge. But yeah, those are good. Let's see. Finland had asked for prayer, remember that, in page 35. She goes, "For 7 days past, I have been in a state of continual prayer for you. I call it prayer. Although the state of mind has been somewhat peculiar, I have desired nothing in particular, but my soul presenting continually its object before God, that God's will might and God's glory might be manifested in it, has been like a lamp that burns without ceasing, so that he could take off, so he could experience God." And she is just praying to go 7 days of continual prayer for this guy. You go, man. 7 minutes is hard for most. You go 7 days. I mean, this is just so cool. He struggled to utterly abandon himself to the will of God. And that's her talking to him about the self-life and letting those things go. And it's hard. And even though the guy's in the church, there's ambition, there's a desire. I mean, he's moving up fast. He was fast-tracking this thing. And then he gets waylaid by stuff she's talking about, and now he's like, well, I really want to know God. I happen to be in the business, but I've been doing it as a job, as a cultural thing, as a religion, but not a relationship with God. And so she really messed him up.
So her statement, a will surrendered is not always a will abandoned.
Then we continue to follow our own plans and inclinations.
And yet we've surrendered.
Yeah.
So is that just talking our initial surrendering to him? We do believe in him. We are people of faith, but
Yeah, but there's some part of self that's still holding on. Yeah, not abandoned to his will.
completely.
Yeah, completely, which is what that's what she writes about. That's what all of her stuff is about. That,
You know, if that were true, that would really help the whole anger issue to be gone.
yeah,
We would not, that would not even be something we would struggle with. We would abandon him, not just surrender.
yeah. Yeah, a whole lot of the emotions, it doesn't mean we're emotionless, it just appropriately used and find its place. Because there's a place for the right kind of anger.
Yeah,
But most of the time it's coming out of this. What frustrates me, that dude just cut me off. The goal of my trip to Tulsa is to arrive at the restaurant on time. And I'm still going to make it on time, whether that guy cuts me off or not. Whether the big truck's on the highway or not. It makes no difference. If there are orange cones, I'm still going to make it to the restaurant. That's the goal. I am so frustrated on this stupid drive. Yeah. And we do it with everything. So, yeah, there's oh my goodness.
If they won't drive the speed limit, it really slows you down from getting there.
Those people.
Especially when they're side to side.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Makes it interesting, doesn't it? Just the drive is enough to go. My emotions are high today. Yeah. Let's see what else is happening here. this is 36. Fenelon took up the gauntlet on her behalf. The doctrine of entire death to self-life or of pure love was spreading so rapidly that many became alarmed and resolved to crush it out. You certainly don't want a whole lot of pure love running around France. Just crush it. That's, the powers that be. And there's a transformation that both of them, and there's a number of others we'll hit from this period of time, as the Lord is grabbing hold of people, and people are wanting to get closer to Him. Things just are taken off in a whole new way, and they're transformed, and it goes so deep. The St. John of the Cross, he's in Spain during this period of time, and he is a monk there, but he wrote The Dark Night of the Soul, and the experience that he had trying to figure out, I just want to get close to God, and he has the depth, and he writes this thing out of what happens in the process of getting closer to God and wrestling through all of those barriers and the emotions and discovering more about himself and more about God, but just feeling like he was up against a huge wall and he had to keep fighting and fighting and fighting. So the Dark Night of the Soul is his story of going through the process, and then the light on the other end. And it's just powerful. I think they even mention him, and because Fenelon and Guillaume would have been familiar with St. John of the Cross. Incredible time. You mentioned the mountains. I like that, because the mountain thing, when we say Rocky Mountains, Appalachian Mountains, Ozark Mountains, nobody ever calls it the Rocky Valleys, Rocky Ozark, anyway, we don't use the valley side of it. You can't have mountains if you don't have the valleys. You just have high plains. So it has to have the valleys, or you don't get, it takes both. And that's this whole experience of walking with Jesus is like, okay, there's mountaintops, but there's valleys. And if there are no valleys, because that's what American Christians really prefer, just really good times that are comfortable. So I want mine to be without any valleys. And it doesn't work that way. And it's the valleys that we often get down to and go, oh, I needed that. Because the self-life thing, I'm stuck with something, and I think my view of things, my dreams, my ambitions, my plans, my way of thinking how this world should work, all of that, and then I just need God to go along with me on those things. You realize that the Tower of Babel in chapter 11 of Genesis is all about the people getting together and to tell God how things ought to be. They're going to build a tower, have God meet them, and they're going to tell him this out. Every temple that is Zeus and Jupiter, I mean, you just put together all the other temples. Those are about, okay, we're going to give you these sacrifices. Here's a goat, because this is what we want. Or this, it's all about, I want somehow to get the divine being, I want to manipulate that. And God in heaven, the one true God's going, no, that's not how we do this. And so he scatters them in chapter 11 of Genesis. And so now people are all scattered all around the world going, what can we do to control our destiny our situation, and it comes back to control, power, money, whatever it is that's and manipulate. If I believe in divine beings, I want to manipulate them. So there's superstition. We're going to handle rattlesnakes in the church service. I mean, just go, really? I want to manipulate that divine being. And he's going, no, that's not how it goes. And that's how they came to this place of going, nope, I just want to get closer to him. I want to understand him. I want to know what God has to say. Yes.
So while his battery's out, I did want to let you all know, I did purchase a year or two ago, whenever I first read the other book, I got letters to men and women, and they mention it at the end of the chapter. It's obviously a used copy from a library somewhere, but up at Amazon. If anybody wants to borrow it from you, it's just that I want it back because I haven't read all the way through it, but anyway, just so you know, I do have it. And it's so interesting. So, yeah. It's, wow.
Look, we have battery. Cool.
That letter is one, Randy, I was looking at it again this morning, as you know, and it reminded me of what you used to do with Chuck Swindoll. People would write in at Insight for Living, and you would respond. And this is what the letters are. They've written to him with a concern, a question, and then it's his letters back to them. And it made me think of what something you used to do, and I love it that you had that opportunity.
And who was this that replied to the letter?
Fenelon. Yeah.
Yeah. Madame Guillaume did that too. I mean, there's a lot of letter writing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because half the time they're in jail or in trouble. They're off. The only way they can get something out is sneak a letter. Yeah.
But neither one of them died, even though they were, what do they call it, confined. They were not in prison.
Mm-hmm.
They were confined to a place, and I'm very thankful for that.
Yeah. She wound up, finishing her days without having all the rich trappings, but she still was taken care of.
Yes.
I mean, she was okay. But her impact was greatly felt in France and across Europe and among believers, and we're still talking about her. So all this time later, smallpox or not, we just think, wow, she's, really something. Let's see what else is happening in there.
Another thing that had brought to my attention that she's in that one prison, the most dreaded, historical dreaded prison in Paris.
Yeah.
She said that her faith in God was so great that her prison seemed like a palace to her.
Isn't that great? Felt like a palace to her. Yeah. Yeah, the Bastille was bad news. And we'll put this up here. On that day, Bastille Day, which is today, 1789 is when it came down, and it's France Day. This is the day of freedom. This is their 4th of July. Isn't that crazy? Because of that thing, and that's where she wound up. The Man in the Iron Mask was there too, but that's a whole different story. It was a bad prison. It needed to go.
One thing
To me, what's really interesting about Fenelon was that when this bishop, whatever, was the greatest literary genius of the day. He wrote this book against Madame Guillaume and sent it to Fenelon for his approval. And he was thinking, well, he's not gonna, not approve this book because he would be afraid. This
Yeah, the
person-
king.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this bishop, and, but Benoit didn't give it his approval, and then he wrote an entire book to reply to Crusade. And I just loved it, how he wouldn't approve the book, he wasn't that afraid of the bishop. and in fact, that just gives me an idea. I think I'll write a book about, in reply to this.
It's true.
It's wonderful.
Would that be a cool movie, though? Just kind of tracking those two in that period of time, and just see how life went and the powers that be. But yeah, that response, that had to aggravate that guy so much.
Well, it said he was so angry at how well the people liked him. That he, said he was really angry.
Yeah. So great.
Well, I just liked it because someone wasn't put in prison because the king feared him.
Yeah.
That right there, I mean, a woman that didn't, it was very hard on her, but yet he listened to what she said and so on. It's just amazing how God worked that out. And then he didn't approve that guy's book.
Yeah.
To top it off, it was good.
It is so good. Yeah. And there's so many things going on that the Savonarola that we looked at last time, he's in Italy in the 1400s. So, and then, we're kind of developing. We've got Luther, Calvin, the whole Reformation thing stirring up in the 1500s. And then we're headed to, and here we are in the 1600s. Middle 1600s, England has a big turnover. They've already separated from the Catholic Church. They've got the Church of England now. Big turnover there. The middle of the century, plague again. So everybody gets to have that exciting thing. London burns. There's a bunch of stuff happening. And the Charles I loses his head. And there's a change in government, civil war in England. And we're moving in a whole new direction. And the reason I'm telling you that is next time we're looking at George Fox and Bunyan. And those guys are from that period of time. So mid-1600s, that's the stuff that was happening. And the king is gone. Charles II hides in France for a while. He eventually comes back around, and he's back in England by the end of the 1600s. And then we've got a whole mess of let's bring the Catholic Church back in with the Pope group, and then another group going, no, let's not. Let's stay with the King. So that goes on, and there's a battle back and forth. And so just people trying to walk with God, it is a challenge. And if you're doing something outside of the Church of England, you're just preaching, like, here's the Bible, I'm going to tell somebody about Jesus, you can get thrown in jail or lose your life, and all of that stuff's happening in the 1600s in England. So next time we'll look at those guys. So we looked at France, we've looked at Italy, now England. All right, Father, thank you. Thanks for this time. Thanks for the people who have been faithful to you, who have discovered you in a variety of ways through the centuries. You've been faithful to them, and you help them through even the hard times, prison, diseases, political powers oppressing them, all of that. And you showed yourself good, and your grace was sufficient. Thank you for being with us today in this hour. In Jesus' name, amen.